Every time an M1 Abrams tank fires its main gun at an armored target, something extraordinary happens. A pencil-thin rod of metal traveling at over 1,500 meters per second punches through steel like it isn't there. Not because of an explosive, not because of fire, but purely because of physics. That rod is made of depleted uranium. It is denser than lead, heavier than steel, and so controversial that governments have spent decades arguing about whether it should exist at all. And here is the part most people never consider. Before any of it becomes a weapon, it starts as a waste product. Depleted uranium is what gets left over when the nuclear industry is done making fuel. Every tank shell, every armor-piercing round, every counterweight in a commercial aircraft begins as industrial garbage. The question is how that garbage becomes one of the most effective and disputed materials on the modern battlefield. The story of depleted uranium begins in the 1940s during the Manhattan Project, when scientists first began separating uranium isotopes for atomic bomb development. They were left with enormous quantities of material that was too weak to be weaponized in a nuclear sense, but too dense and chemically reactive to simply discard. For decades, this material sat in cylinders at enrichment facilities in Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee. For more than 60 years, gaseous diffusion plants enriched uranium for nuclear weapons and later for the commercial nuclear industry, generating depleted uranium hexafluoride as a co-product at every stage. By the early 1990s, the United States had accumulated over 560,000 metric tons of it, stored in more than 46,000 steel cylinders sitting in open-air yards. Globally, depleted uranium stockpiles were estimated at 1.2 million tons by 2021. The military saw an opportunity. Rather than a liability to be managed, here was a substance with exceptional physical properties. The question was what to do with it. To understand what depleted uranium is, you first need to understand what enrichment removes from it. Natural uranium consists primarily of two isotopes, U-238 and U-235. In the United States, uranium is enriched by the gaseous diffusion process, in which the compound uranium hexafluoride is heated and converted from a solid to a gas. That gas is then pushed through porous membranes. The UF6, which diffuses through the membrane, is slightly enriched, while the gas which did not pass through is depleted in U-235. This process is repeated many times in a series of diffusion stages called a cascade. The gas must be processed through some 1,400 stages to obtain a product with a concentration of 3 to 4% U-235. What remains after enrichment is the depleted stream. Uranium hexafluoride with a U-235 content typically below 0.3%. Up to 90% of the original uranium feed ends up as depleted uranium. To convert that gas into usable metal, it must first undergo deconversion. The DUF6 is reacted with steam, producing uranyl fluoride and hydrogen fluoride gas. The solid uranyl fluoride is then processed further and reduced with hydrogen or calcium to yield uranium metal. That metal is then alloyed, typically with 0.75% titanium, to increase strength and ductility. The resulting ingots are cast, rolled, and machined into their final forms: rods, plates, or precisely shaped penetrators. The finished penetrator for an M829 tank round used in the Abrams 120mm gun measures roughly 700 mm long and weighs approximately 4.6 kilograms. Every gram of it was once sitting in a cylinder yard as radioactive industrial waste. The reason militaries worldwide adopted depleted uranium is straightforward physics. Depleted uranium typically contains 0.3% U-235 or less and has a density of 19.1 grams per cubic centimeter, making it the seventh densest metal after gold, tungsten, plutonium, neptunium, platinum, iridium, and osmium. That density gives DU penetrators a decisive advantage over steel or even tungsten alternatives. A smaller cross-section carries more mass, concentrating kinetic energy onto a tighter point of impact. But density alone does not explain the full picture. Du has two additional properties that make it uniquely effective. First, it is self-sharpening. Unlike tungsten, which flattens and mushrooms on impact, depleted uranium fractures in a way that maintains a sharp tip as it drives through armor. Second, it is pyrophoric, meaning Du fragments ignite spontaneously when they fragment at high velocity. Du is a natural pyrophoric material, which enhances the incendiary effects once the penetrator breaches armor. Inside a tank crew compartment, this turns a physical penetration into a thermal catastrophe. The Gulf War demonstrated this on an industrial scale. US officials eventually admitted that 340 tons of Du were fired during the Gulf War. Iraqi armor, including T-72 tanks that had been considered formidable, was destroyed at ranges and in numbers that shocked military analysts. General Electric developed the GAU-8's 30mm shells specifically because the optimal material, tungsten, was primarily controlled by China and the Soviet Union, making depleted uranium a strategic as well as ballistic choice. That decision locked Du into the core of Western military doctrine for decades. Here is where the story becomes genuinely contested. Du has mild radioactivity, generating alpha particles that clothing and even human skin can block, and there are studies that suggest it might be a toxic carcinogen. The military's position has consistently been that battlefield exposure poses minimal risk. Critics disagree. The number of Gulf War veterans who have developed the so-called Gulf War syndrome rose to about one-third of the 800,000 US forces deployed. And the debate about Du's role has remained unresolved for over 15 years. Kidney is reported as the main target organ for the chemical toxicity of this metal, alongside alterations in behavior, neurologic adverse effects, immunotoxicity, embryotoxicity, and hepatotoxicity in chronic exposure cases. A 2005 epidemiology review concluded that the human epidemiological evidence is consistent with increased risk of birth defects in offspring of persons exposed to Du. The environmental contamination compounds the issue. After a Du penetrator strikes armor, it doesn't disappear. A portion burns and aerosolizes into fine particles. The rest buries into soil, where it corrodes slowly and can leach into groundwater. In 2001, governments of many NATO countries called for urgent investigations into the use of depleted uranium in weapons in Bosnia and Kosovo after soldiers from 9 countries reported developing leukemia, and the United Nations found radioactive contamination at sites where Du weapons had been used. The WHO and IAEA have both published assessments concluding that risks under normal exposure scenarios are low, but normal exposure and battlefield exposure are not the same thing. And the communities near former conflict zones in Iraq, Kosovo, and Bosnia continue to report elevated rates of cancers decades after the last round was fired. The US Army, meanwhile, is looking at the demilitarization and disposal of more than 35 million rounds of ammunition with depleted uranium cores, predominantly 30mm shells for the GAU-8 cannon on the A-10 Warthog. There is something deeply strange about depleted uranium's existence. It is a material that no one wanted, waste from a process designed to split atoms that became one of the most effective anti-armor materials ever deployed. The same properties that make it lethal on the battlefield make it almost impossible to cleanly dispose of afterward. Approximately 20,000 tons of depleted uranium are produced each year as tails from uranium enrichment operations worldwide. Every nuclear power station that fuels a city generates more of it. Every enrichment cascade that supplies reactor fuel adds to stockpiles that already measure in the millions of tons. It is the shadow side of the nuclear age. A substance that began as waste became a weapon and now sits in the soil of countries that never signed up to host it. The question that remains genuinely unanswered is not whether depleted uranium is effective. That much is beyond dispute. The question is what we owe to the places and people left behind after its effectiveness has been demonstrated. If you found this worth understanding, subscribe and leave a comment below with which industrial process you think deserves this kind of investigation next.